This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Investigations are continuing in California following at least 10 people who were killed in a shooting at a Lunar New Year festival. Thousands of people had been gathering at Monterey Park near Los Angeles when a gunman opened fire. Another 10 people were taken to hospital, with at least one in a critical condition. The LA County Sheriff says a male suspect fled the scene and remains at large.
Very preliminary description has been described as a male Asian. We're interviewing victims and witnesses. We've gotten different descriptions of one suspect. So when I say it's preliminary, please again be patient with us. We are here to tell you that we are utilizing every resource to apprehend this suspect in what we believe to be one of the county's most heinous cases.
Meanwhile, a cabinet minister has told GB News Nadhim Zahawi has the Prime Minister's support. That's following allegations about his tax affairs. The Conservative Party chairman's admitted he reached a settlement with HMRC, believed to be almost £5 million, following an error over a multi-million-pound shareholding in the polling company YouGov. Labour has called his position untenable, but Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says he believes Mr Zahawi has paid his taxes.
I don't know any more details than what he has already put in the public domain. I don't think it would be right or proper for me to speculate or guess about any further details about his tax affairs. But he has been a successful entrepreneur, building a company which has paid tax, employing people who have paid taxes, and he has himself paid tax, a considerable amount, because he's been successful.
At least 380 migrants have arrived in the UK on 10 small boats overnight, making it the busiest day of channel crossings so far this year. GB News understands a few other boats have also set off this morning, but haven't yet made it to the UK. The boats were monitored by French naval vessels, which can only intervene if the migrants get into difficulties. Today's arrivals bring the total number of those crossing the English Channel this year to 530. And family, friends and fans have gathered to attend a memorial service for Lisa Marie Presley, held at her father's estate in Memphis, Tennessee. The US singer and only child of Elvis Presley is being laid to rest at the Graceland mansion she inherited from her rock and roll father. She died on the 12th of January after reportedly suffering a cardiac arrest at home. She was 54. Now, among those who paid tribute were the Duchess of York and Lisa Marie's mother, Priscilla, who called her an icon and a superhero. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's over to Free Speech Nation.
The UK government blocks the SNP's gender reform bill. Rishi Sunak is fined for not wearing a seatbelt, and a health expert tells us all to stop eating cake in the office. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is a show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics. And of course, we'll have all the latest news from those friendly social justice activists, unless they manage to get the show cancelled before 9 p.m. Coming up, though, over the next 2 hours, I will have guests here in the studio to debate Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's decision to block Scotland's gender recognition reform bill. We're also going to be discussing government plans to ban what they are calling trans conversion therapy, and we'll be asking why Jeremy Clarkson appears to be losing TV contracts over a column he wrote criticising Meghan Markle. But that's just the tip of a hefty iceberg of current affairs. Joining me tonight to answer your questions are comedians Diane Spencer and Josh Howie. Welcome both. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's yesterday was my son's 11th birthday.
Well, I don't care.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know your son. I've never met him.
Because that was the birthday present, was you to spend a week with him.
Oh, I see. Well, I've ruined that now.
Yeah, sorry, son. No,
he doesn't watch the show, does he?
He's not interested. Well, Not anymore, no.
No, not now. OK, I'm losing viewers left and right. How are you, Diane?
Oh, I'm grand. I had a lovely time yesterday. I was on Headliners. I had a gig in Soho with a drag queen. It was fabulous.
I mean, you look very glam as ever.
Oh, I love it. Why not? YOLO, as the children say.
They do say, don't they? I don't know what they mean, but they say it anyway. Let's get some questions from our lovely audience. Our first question is from Peter. Peter? Yes. Hello, Peter.
Yeah, hi, good evening.
Hi.
So, if Rishi Sunak can't be trusted to wear a seatbelt in a car, what else can he be trusted with? Driving the economy?
Well, so poor Rishi. So Rishi Sunak, as you know, he's been hit with this fixed penalty notice by Lancashire police because he posted an Instagram clip in which he was in the car, but he wasn't wearing the seatbelt, and he posted this clip to highlight his plans for levelling up. That was the idea. But he has accepted, he has apologised, he has paid the fine. Diana, is this a big deal, really?
Well, I think he's trying to help the crime statistics because technically they have solved something now.
Yes.
So that's
okay.
great.
Well,
yeah,
that's
I think by giving it to them on a plate, by saying, no, look, I definitely have no... And Lancashire police, you've got to remember, you've got Lancashire police who are trying to essentially rebuild the reputation of what all the rest of the police are doing.
Yes.
So they're like, no, we don't treat anybody differently. And I love the fact that they went, we've issued a 42-year-old male. It was like, ooh.
Makes him sound like a serial killer or something. Like you can't really reveal his identity.
I thought that was quite shady.
It's a bit much, Josh. Is that? But they're calling it Beltgate. I mean, this isn't Nixon, is it? It really isn't.
No, it's not. And also, like, the other part, from London. 42-year-old. We got that guy from London. We showed them. But, no, it's ridiculous. But what also makes me laugh is the people online trying to find stuff about Keir Starmer.
Oh, really?
So people were, like, putting up photos. Someone was like, look at this clip of Keir Starmer. He's not wearing a seatbelt. And it's from, like, 25 years ago, Keir Starmer's got, like, brown hair, and he's in a taxi, and it wasn't against the law at the time. And it's just
so
this
desperate.
determination.
Look, I'm not saying you should... I mean, I think you should wear a seatbelt in the back of it. I absolutely do. But, you know, it's not the biggest deal in the world, is it? Ultimately.
I mean, it kind of is if you are the Prime Minister and the guy has to slam on the brakes.
Yeah, but I get it, because he was in the car making a video, and he was thinking it would be cumbersome if you were strapped up. You know, you've got to think in terms of the aesthetics.
Yeah, but he's always thinking in terms of the aesthetics, which is how Rishi goes wrong, because he's always trying to be this glossy kind of PR guru, but then he doesn't know how to use a contactless card, and then he asks a homeless man, are you in finance? It's like, no, Rishi.
Oh, God love him. Anyway, we're going to move on to another question now from Catherine. Where is Catherine? Hello, Catherine.
Hi. Should straight actors be able to play gay roles?
Oh, well, now this comes up again and again, but this week this is specifically about an actor called Theo James, he was in this show called The White Lotus, which I haven't seen, but they're now saying he might be playing George Michael in this biopic of the singer, and he's expressed interest anyway. And other people are now chipping in and saying that's outrageous. The singer Adam Lambert saying, you know, this is awful. He actually tweeted saying, yay, another straight man playing a gay icon. I don't really care about that. Do you? I mean, do you think you... No, it's acting, isn't it?
No, I think they need to find someone who's Greek, who's from London, who's called George.
Yes.
Michael. It's a documentary.
Yes. Should you only be able to play...
What, people of... Yeah, but the question is, when it comes to sexuality, does that mean that gay men are only allowed to play gay men?
Well, that's the implication, isn't it?
Well, that's where you take the logic. And,
but Rock Hudson played a brilliant straight man all those years.
That is arguable. I wonder how many people can get that reference.
Well, no, but it's true. I mean, look, it is called acting for a reason. I think you should be able to play whatever, you know, within limits. Like, I couldn't play a 50-year-old black woman.
No.
But I could play a straight man, right?
You could do very well. I mean, it was straight-ish. I mean,
Unbelievable.
You're nailing the dress code. That's...
OK, there we go.
Doing that brilliantly.
There we go.
But the thing is, it is acting, and as Josh said, if you go down this pathway, then you're only going to mean that actors can't really show you their skills. And then you end up with a lot of... We're going to miss out on so much great storytelling. Like, you think about Charlize Theron, who... played Eileen Wuornos. Like, Charlize Theron is an amazing actor. She's not a psychopath doing sex work on the side of the road shooting people.
No, she's not.
But she did this brilliant performance and she got an Oscar for it. And you think about all those things that we're going to miss because you have to play in your lane.
Well, is the argument, though, that, you know, there aren't enough roles going to gay actors? Because I think that's ridiculous.
But it's not actually going to him. That's the issue. You see, Theo James did what a lot of actors do. He went, I wouldn't mind playing George Michael.
Oh,
and then it's not even in the works yet.
Okay.
Like, even
no,
George
I see what he's
Michael's
done.
estate. Yeah.
I see what he's done. OK, well, we're not going to dignify that anymore, tactic. Let's go on to another question from Danny.
Yes, my question is, should Germany be doing more to support Ukraine?
OK, so this has been happening this week. The world is still waiting for a decision on Germany on whether they're going to allow the Leopard 2 tanks to be sent to Ukraine. A lot of pressure on Germany at the moment because they're sort of... I think they don't want to be the main target. Is that the issue here?
Yeah, well, they've built up a very cosy relationship with Russia over the last sort of 15, 20 years. And so they're sort of caught between two spaces. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure in Germany itself.
Yes.
And then, but the problem is that their tanks are now sort of leased out, all the designs, to the rest of Europe.
Yes.
So the rest of Europe can't send the tanks until Germany allows them to do the licence. So it is an issue.
Well, I mean, they're saying they want the US to be taking the lead, but the US already are taking the lead in terms of the money that
in
they're
lots of other ways, and their tanks just aren't appropriate because they run on
Jet
whatever.
fuel.
Yeah,
fuel,
exactly.
something,
Yeah, what do you make of this one, Diane?
I think that Olaf Scholz, he is doing a lot of the talking and his rhetoric was initially very good,
Yeah.
but then he has not backed it up at all by sending in any of the armaments. I mean, apparently 46% of Germans are saying we oppose sending the tanks and
Right.
43% say we want you to send the tanks. So there's the idea that he's playing towards the home crowd and saying, oh, OK, well, I'm not going to send the tanks. But like Josh said, there's so many different countries that have got all of these Leopard 2s and they don't want to risk, you know, having no armaments from
Yes.
Germany in the future by not sending them. But Putin is going to escalate things no matter what you do. And right now, Olaf Scholz thinks he's OK because he thinks he's not in the firing line. But Putin is just going to change where he's firing.
Yeah, OK. Well, look, this isn't going away, this story, so we will probably come back to it. But also, later in the show, we're going to get more questions from our wonderful studio audience. But after the break on Free Speech Nation, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has blocked the Scottish Government's gender recognition reform bill, potentially prompting a constitutional crisis. We will be asking if he was right to do so. See you in a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Rishi Sunak has blocked the Scottish Government's gender reform bill. The bill would allow teenagers as young as 16 to legally change their gender and reduces the period for which an applicant must have lived in their acquired gender before submitting an application from 2 years down to 3 months. The government has used Section 35 of the Scotland Act 1998 to block Holyrood's gender recognition reform bill from becoming law, claiming it will have an impact on UK-wide equality legislation. And this is the first time that Section 35 has been used. Prime Minister Nicola Sturgeon has described Westminster's action to block the gender bill as, quote, a full frontal attack on the Scottish Parliament. So here to discuss this with me, the discrimination and employment law barrister Robin Moira-White and the family law barrister Sarah Phillimore. Welcome back. Sarah, I'm going to come to you first. There was an article in today's Times, and this is by Ellie Gomersall, and the president of the National Union of Students Scotland. And this is a trans person saying, the gender reform bill is simply going to make life easier for people like me. It means that marriage records, death certificates, all of these things will just be more accurately reflective in terms of how this person lives. What's wrong with that?
The charitable interpretation of that is that it's a fantasy. The accurate interpretation is it is untrue. Now, I accept that in most interactions in life, sex is irrelevant. It's not relevant now as we sit here talking. But we organise society around the protected category of sex, because when it matters, it really matters. So a GRC will give a biological male who doesn't have to be, according to Scotland, diagnosed with gender dysphoria, doesn't have to make any modifications to his body whatsoever. The GRC gives him the legal sex female and allows him access into more female spaces. So to say this is simply something that I hold to myself that makes me feel better about myself is not true, because it changes the meaning of sex in the Equality Act. And that was the recent judgment of Lady Haldane, where some commentators said the Equality Act defines sex as purely biological. She said, no, legal sex is included within that definition.
I'm going to come to you, Robin, because the bill itself states that it will have no implications or ramifications on UK-wide equality law. Is that accurate?
Yes, I think it is. We have the situation that Sarah's described already anyway, that there are no particular requirements for a GRC under UK law. You don't have to modify your body. You have to convince a panel that you are sufficiently committed to your affirmed sex. And that doesn't require particular surgery in all cases. So what I think's been lost in the rather soundbite debate that we've had is what the changes in Scotland actually do and the small changes that they make. And I think we've lost the focus on the Equality Act as the gatekeeping act for single-sex spaces and the legitimate concerns that people have about being able to, in certain circumstances, maintain privacy, all of which is maintained by the Equality Act, none of which is changed by the Scottish Act.
So you don't accept the idea that the Scottish Act will effectively change what the Equality Act means when it refers to the protection of sex?
Well, we know that because Lady Haldane's judgment, which Sarah's absolutely correctly referred to, is the judgment now under the existing legislation for the whole of the UK. We don't have the changed Scottish GRC system And yet Lady Haldane indeed has supported the view that I have taken for many years, that the Equality Act does not refer just to biological sex. There is some sense of maleness or femaleness which the Equality Act deals with, which is not tied to biological sex.
Is that the problem, Sarah, that the Equality Act isn't clear?
Yes, definitely. I take the view that Robin takes, and I was surprised to find myself in a minority when the Haldane judgment came out. I said, but surely the Gender Recognition Act, there's no other interpretation looking at Section 9 other than legal sex comes under the umbrella of sex, so you've now got legal and biological. The problem, though, is I don't agree with Robin at all that these are small changes. For a start, it's going down to age 16, 17. As Michael Foran pointed out in his very clear piece of the 6 significant changes to the Equality Act, that's a biggie, because suddenly now schools are going to have to grapple with the impact of that. It's just not right to say these are small changes, because clearly the bill is designed to enlarge the cohort of people who will be able to get a GRC, because the requirement of a diagnosis of gender dysphoria goes.
But is it the case that acquiring a GRC may not increase the likelihood that people will go into female-only spaces?
I think the confusion around the law is definitely going to be a problem. And we know we've got confusion because on the one hand, we've got Lord Hope, a former Supreme Court judge, saying, I think the government were absolutely right to invoke Section 35. We've got Charlie Faulkner, a former Lord Chancellor, going, they're absolutely wrong. The key for me is, do women have a right to single-sex female spaces? And if you think they don't, then explain why. And what's happening now is, I think, quite deliberately from some quarters, that issue is being confused and obfuscated. And this process doesn't help.
Well, let's talk about that issue. Robin, can I put that question to you? Do women have a right to single-sex spaces?
Well, not under the law as it stands. That's not the structure of the Equality Act. The Equality Act makes provision for single-sex spaces, and that's the gatekeepers of that are the providers. So I have, for example, 2 rape crisis centres as clients, one in Edinburgh, one in Brighton, and they are the experts in providing that sort of service, and they are trans-inclusive services. Now, they're entitled to make different choices, but they don't.
But is it possible that with the changes, or with the ambiguity over what is meant in the Equality Act in terms of sex, that if, for instance, a rape crisis centre was set up, but it says it will only be for biological males and trans-identified people won't be admitted, would that be something you would object to?
Well, it's not something I have a view on, in a sense, in that the Act provides that opportunity. Now, it's not an absolute opportunity for the service provider, because it has to be a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. So the service provider, I don't know, couldn't say that the maintenance person has to be female because they're not interacting perhaps with the users of the service. But the people who run the service could decide, as some services have, to provide the service on a trans-exclusive basis. And if they can show that that's a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim, then they act legally.
So is there a problem here, Sarah, insofar as the Act in itself, the Scottish Bill, won't really change that much on a practical level? People are concerned about these single-sex spaces. But actually, will this legislation make really that much of a difference if, for instance, rape crisis centres can say, we are exclusively female?
I say that it will, because the express purpose is to increase the cohort of people who will acquire a gender recognition certificate. As the government said in its reasons for invoking Section 35, all safeguards have been removed. The government is not convinced that there are appropriate safeguards now for women and girls. And I note Robin shaking Robin's head. Now, I think about a year ago, Robin, we met on a Zoom for equality and diversity for students. And you said during that Zoom that women who say there is a clash between trans rights and women's rights are, and I quote, completely mad. Are you still of that view?
I think the focus... So at the moment, we have a focus on the Scottish Bill. The Scottish Bill does very limited things. Yes, it increases the cohort. There are thought to be 25 to 30 GRCs being granted in Scotland each year at the moment. That may rise to 200 or 300, but set against the population, it's still tiny, tiny numbers. And a really important point is that our combating violence against women and girls is really important. And if we focus on an irrelevance, which is the trans issue related to that, and it is an irrelevance, then we run the great risk of not focusing on those predatory males who are really the risk, both to natal females and trans females.
Can I ask you a bit more about that, Robin? Because you say that it's an irrelevance, that the fear that certain campaigners have that self-ID, gender self-ID, could put women at risk.
Yeah.
But there have been cases, haven't there, where people have exploited the notion of self-ID in order to commit acts of violence against women.
I listened to a Cure's show yesterday when preparing to come on, and she postulated a circumstance where a predatory male presents themselves as female to access a female space. Now, OK, we have 350 million people living under self-ID systems at the moment, and I don't think we have instances of that. But just think of the logic of that for a moment. Are they then going to go on and apply to the state for a GRC, and put their hand up effectively and say, look, here I am, call attention to myself, when no one needs a GRC to attend a service, no one needs an altered birth certificate to attend a service?
Do they need a GRC, though, to be transferred to a woman's prison?
No, absolutely not. The pathway is slightly different whether they have one or not, but what the prison service does is it takes a risk-based approach. It looks at the needs of the individual, the needs of the population, and it takes a risk-based approach as to where they're placed on the prison estate.
But mistakes have been made, haven't there, Sarah, in terms of prisons? I mean...
Right now, Andrew, right at this minute, a gentleman who now wants to be called Isla is last week undergoing a trial for rape. And his victims were having to, in court, refer to her penis. There's also a man called Caballero who has abducted and raped his female care worker, who's going to be released from prison and wants to be called Claire. There's absolutely no doubt that getting a GRC gives men like this more clout. Now, I completely agree with Robin. The problem is not trans people. The problem is predatory men. But at the moment, we are given no test to show that so-and-so is a true and honest trans person and so-and-so is a predatory male. And removing the requirement for a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria is increasing the risks, as the UK government say.
Am I right in thinking that an amendment was proposed to the Scottish bill that would make it impossible for, say, someone who was on trial for sexual assault to say subsequently, I'm of the
Two
opposite
amendments
sex?
were proposed around sexual offending, and one of them, yes, was anyone who was awaiting trial, there should be a pause on their application to save female victims of male sexual assault from having to refer to their attacker in court as she. Now, if that ever happens to me, and I hope it doesn't, I will go to prison before I will call a male rapist she. This cannot have been the purpose of the Gender Recognition Act. This cannot be where the framers of that act thought we would end up 20 years later.
So, Robin, there's a dispute here about to what extent the Gender Recognition Act will have an impact on whether male sexual offenders can be transferred to women's prison. But do you accept that there is a legitimate concern there, that men will, obviously in prison, exploit that, and to be housed with vulnerable women? That it has happened, and it probably will continue to happen.
I haven't seen evidence of that. And the way in which our judges conduct trials in the UK is that there is a thing called the Equal Treatment Bench Book, which judges take their cue from. And that makes very clear that there are certain circumstances where a victim should not be required to refer to an offender in a particular way.
Only after an amendment and after protest from a number of women. Maria McLaughlin was caught by the original version of the Equal Treatment Bench Book and was told to refer to the 6-foot man who knocked her to the ground as she.
And we also have Jonathan Mallon, who's this serial rapist. This was reported just 2 days ago. Now says he wants to be called Charlene. He's been bragging to other inmates that he's going to be in a women's prison by Easter. I mean, these are serious concerns, aren't they?
Yeah, of course they are. And the prison service is the right service to risk assess their needs, the needs of the rest of the prison population, and to safely manage. There's no bar on placing a prisoner either on what is referred to as the male estate or the female estate, depending on what the appropriate safe place for them to be is in the estate. And the prison service is the appropriate service to manage that, properly risk assessed.
Sarah, so Nicola Sturgeon has come in on this. She had an interview the other day and she said the fear that women have about predatory men accessing women-only spaces to abuse and attack women is very real, but you don't have to show your birth certificate to access women-only spaces. So the point is this bill does not give predatory men any more ability to abuse women than that predatory man already has. This seems to be a widely held view, though, doesn't it?
Well, I can only repeat the answer I gave a little while ago. I disagree because there is no test now being offered to us to say this is a true and honest trans woman and this is a predatory male. Removing all safeguards, taking the 2-year period down to 3 months. Look, the UK government has said in terms the reason that Section 35 was invoked the first time ever was because the government was not satisfied that the safeguards in the bill were sufficient for women and girls. We've got the UN rapporteur giving evidence to the Scottish politicians about this, and she seems to have been dismissed and ignored.
Yes.
We've got female politicians being jeered at and intimidated in the House of Commons. We've got Scottish politicians standing in front of placards wielded by men saying, decapitate TERFs. So Nicola Sturgeon needs to wake up. This is a very unpopular bill in her own country and amongst her own politicians.
So, Robin, I've spoken to a lot of feminists who have concerns about this, and none of them have said to me that they feel that trans people are inherently predatory or that there's a connection between being trans and being a predator, but they're concerned about the exploitation. Sarah just raised an interesting issue. How can you be sure that someone who claims to be trans is, or whether they... I mean, how do you validate self-ID is what I'm asking.
Every category of person in society has good people and bad people.
Yes, I think we'd all agree.
In every category. And I mean, a slightly ridiculous analogy is that we all use telephones. Criminals use telephones. But what you don't do is ban telephones because criminals use telephones. What you do is identify wrongful use and look at that and criminalise that.
But the trouble is if people can't... if there's no way to measure self-ID...
Andrew, we're right back to... I mean, I've been in practice 30 years, and when I started in practice, Section 28 was in place, and it was still acceptable to say you shouldn't have gay men as primary school teachers because they're after your children. And that connection constantly being made between trans people and criminals or sex offenders or whatever is the thing that winds trans people up no end. No trans person would say that an offender should not be properly dealt with. No trans person would say that. What we need to focus on is dealing properly with offenders and separately, properly with trans people.
Andrew, can I come in on that? Because it's a matter of real bafflement to me that Robin sat throughout Alison Bailey's employment tribunal, because Robin was junior counsel for Stonewall, and heard all of this explained at length and eloquently by Ben Cooper KC. The problem is not trans people. The problem is men. And if you are allowing men an easy route to identify as women, that puts women and girls at risk of harm. That is incontrovertible. So rather than answering that, and I note that Robin never gave an answer to my question, whether Robin was still of the view that I and other women like me are completely mad for having these views. I don't think we are, and Lord Hope doesn't think we are, and the UK government doesn't think we are. But, I mean, kudos to Robin for coming and having this debate. I think it is really significant, because this should have been happening 4 or 5 years ago. Glad it's happening now. But unless people are willing to be honest about these central issues and not simply come back with the same tired old tropes of force-teaming transness with sexuality, this isn't Section 28. No gay man has ever wanted to run a race against a woman. No gay man has ever wanted to go into a woman's refuge. It's a completely false and unhelpful analogy. And if it winds trans people up, I'm sorry, the answer is for trans people to engage honestly with what is a real concern. I'm not making this up for thrills. I'm not a bigot spouting hate. I'm very, very worried about women and girls, and people need to engage with that.
So it's about minorities, isn't it? You know, I suppose a similar analogy might be that with schools, you know, we have disclosure and borrowing service checks for everyone, all teachers, because there might be a tiny minority who will be wanting to gain access to vulnerable children. Yeah. But what those checks are not implying is that teachers are inherently, have a predilection towards predatory behaviour. And similarly, no one is saying, or at least Sarah certainly is not saying, that trans people are inherently predatory. But there is a minority of men who will exploit the system. Is that not a fair point? And how is that anti-trans, in your view?
It's not anti-trans per se, but, for example, some of the proposals in Scotland, and I sat in the Scottish Parliament all the way through the debates, what the Scottish Government have done is add into offender legislation in Scotland some protections, and some protections against sex offenders being able to gain some of the advantages of a gender recognition certificate in Scotland. And that's exactly how it should be dealt with, that the protections should relate to the wrongdoers and not the generality of the population or the generality of the trans population.
But I suppose the counter-argument is that you just need to, that the law, when it comes to prisons and spaces, just needs to focus on biology, but that you give people the right to identify however they want in every other walk of life. I mean, that seems like a reasonable compromise, isn't it?
But we've identified at the start of the discussion that the sex, effectively, as measured by the Equality Act, is not biological. So trans people's sex is not founded in biology. It's founded in their innate sense of self. So that doesn't work.
Well, I disagree with that. Sex in the Equality Act, as I understand it, is quite clearly biological sex and legal sex. Legal sex doesn't automatically override biological sex. And that, I think your compromise makes perfect sense. As I said before, sex is often irrelevant in most day-to-day interactions, but when it matters, it really, really matters. And I note, for example, Robin has said that Robin did not make any changes to Robin's voice because Robin wanted to retain that male privilege of a deeper voice in an advocacy setting. Now, that's not something
Sarah,
that's available
I'm really sorry,
to
but
women.
that's a complete misrepresentation of anything I've said.
Right. Well, I apologise if so. That's what I'd heard and understood you to be saying, that you didn't choose to feminise your voice.
No.
Because the deeper
Robin,
voice...
you have to be able to come back on...
I will.
Yeah. No, if that's wrong, then, of course...
It's completely wrong.
I will retract and apologise. But it does underscore my point that sex, when it matters, is not something that I, as a woman, can identify out of. I'm stuck with it and all the consequences it has for my body and my vulnerability when faced with a man.
Well, this is obviously a very difficult issue, but we are out of time, but I would like to thank you both very much for coming on.
Can I answer the voice point?
Absolutely, of course, yes. It's important that you do that, yeah.
Right. So what I said was that, what I remember saying was that my voice is my voice, and there are surgical techniques which can alter a voice. As an oral advocate, it's my speaking tool, and there are great risks in terms of going down the surgical route to alter a voice, and that's why I've chosen not to do that, and why on occasion still I get misgendered when I phone up my hotel. There are wonderful female advocates with appropriate female voices. Sarah, no doubt, is one. I wish I had a different voice. I wish I had had the opportunity that young people have these days to go through what I would have regarded as the right puberty and not have my voice broadened and deepened when it did, which was part of the awful experience that trans people have when they go through what they regard for themselves as the wrong puberty. Now, what I did not say ever was that I retain the speaking voice that I have because it retains male privilege. If I could have an appropriate female speaking voice, if you could snap your fingers and do that for me, Andrew, I would be delighted.
OK. Well, I think the point has been clarified, and I think that's absolutely fair. And I would like to thank you both for coming on to talk about this, and I hope we can do this again, because I think there are so many issues relating to this that we just don't get to talk about ever because it just doesn't happen. So I do really appreciate your participation. Thank you to Sarah and Robin. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be talking about the British government plans to ban trans conversion therapy with Dennis Kavanagh. Please do not go anywhere.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. The British government is planning to go ahead with a ban on what they are calling trans conversion therapy. The government had already agreed to ban gay conversion therapy, but activists have argued that they need to include conversion practices aimed at changing someone's gender identity. But many are fearful that this ban could inadvertently criminalise parents, teachers and doctors who are trying to offer therapeutic help for children struggling with issues of gender. So joining me now to discuss this is the director of the Gay Men's Network, Dennis Kavanagh. Dennis, you will have to help clarify this to me, because when people think of conversion therapy, they think of gay men being wired up to electrodes, some doctors sort of trying to forcibly change their sexual orientation. And trans people are saying, well, we want a similar ban, which is what the government has agreed to. How is it any different?
It's completely different, because what these conversion therapy bans, so-called, do around the planet is this. They say to any doctors, such as those practising at the Tavistock, the UK's premier gender clinic that had to be closed because it was, quote, not safe, they say to those doctors, if you talk to a child about their gender identity, their sense of whether they're a boy or a girl, and you do anything other than accept that child's self-diagnosis, then you're guilty of conversion therapy. And what that means is that a doctor who's dealing with a child, many of these children are autistic, or they're looked after children, many of them grow up to be gay. If a doctor does their job, they're made a criminal by these bans.
So in other words, any kind of explorative therapy, you know, a child comes along and says, I think I'm in the wrong body, you're suggesting that the doctor would have to affirm that unquestioningly, even though they're they might be gay, might be autistic, all those other things that are happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is driven by extremist child sex change charities like Mermaids, who've had a malign influence at the Tavistock. As far back as 2018, Dr. David Bell wrote that the clinic was dealing with homophobic parents. It was dealing with children who were dealing with internalised homophobia, their own sense of discomfort at being gay, and the staff there were placating charities like Mermaids. So what these sorts of bills do, they're Orwellian, really. They say they prevent conversion therapy, but they fuel the problem they claim to solve, and they create gay conversion by gender. And that's what's going on with these bills.
So why, then, is Rishi Sunak saying, well, we'll put a ban on explorative therapy for children struggling with gender?
Well, it's a really, really good question, because a number of us at the Gay Men's Network, fantastic organisation Sex Matters, Transgender Trend, Lesbian Labour, lots of organisations, you'll notice lots of gay organisations, made this point, and the previous administration accepted the point and said, we're not going to go ahead with this ban because we don't want to make criminals of doctors, and we've got to tread very carefully when we're looking at autistic kids, gay kids, looked after kids. We get a volte-face from the government now, who say that they're bringing this back in the same week that they're challenging Scotland. I wonder if the two are connected.
Could they be connected? Is it...
Perhaps there's a political trade-off going on here, and there's now wild rumours circulating around Westminster that there's going to be some sort of modified ban that tries to deal with our concerns. But we don't know if that's true or not. So it's very worrying for a lot of gay people, a lot of gay activists looking at this. What we're hearing is there's going to be a ban, but it's going to exempt doctors and it's going to exempt parents. But that makes no sense, because if it's OK for a doctor to say it in a surgery, why is it not OK for someone else to say something?
But then if you were a trans person who'd gone through all of these procedures, often very painful, expensive and difficult procedures to do, and then someone tried to forcibly change your identity, that would be a problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah, of course it would, but it doesn't happen. There is no such thing as trans conversion therapy. These bills are aimed at paediatricians doing their jobs. The idea that there's people going around desperately trying to violently persuade trans people not to be trans is a fantasy. This whole thing is a fantasy. I'll tell you what there is a history of. There's a history of gay conversion therapy. There's a history, as you've summarised, of homosexual men like me being wired up to electrodes, of lesbians being correctively raped. This is our issue. That's our painful history. As ever, it's being force-teamed with the trans issue. And what's happening, of course, is that the concerns of gay people coming absolutely last.
So this is really interesting, isn't it, that a significant majority of those kids who struggle with gender as kids turn out to be gay in later life as adults. Yeah. So therefore, if you are affirming those nascent feelings, you are effectively fixing a gay child.
Yeah, that's right. What you're doing is you're saying, let's look first, what's the diagnostic criteria? It's, little Johnny played with the wrong toys. He liked Barbie, so that's facile, and it's homophobic, because vast majority of gender non-conforming kids do grow up to be gay. And as you pointed out there, the next thing that happens in a surgical environment, in a clinical environment, is these children are put in a place where they are told only surgical correction, only serious medication that will render them infertile, will render them sterile, will destroy their sexual function. Only that is the answer. This is madness. This is madness. We have recreated gay conversion therapy under the banner of gender. This is, I think, the most difficult time, the most dangerous time for any child to grow up gay right now.
Dennis Kavanagh, thank you very much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. And after the break, Jeremy Clarkson has found himself in trouble since writing a column about the Duchess of Sussex, which some commentators felt went too far. But has there been an overreaction? Tom Slater from Spiked will be here to discuss.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. High-profile broadcaster Jeremy Clarkson appears set to lose his TV shows on Amazon Prime after he was widely criticised for a column he wrote in The Sun about the Duchess of Sussex. Among other remarks, Clarkson said he hated Markle and dreamt of the day she was made to parade naked through the streets while crowds chanted at her. He has publicly apologised for the column, but in the furore that followed the remarks, Amazon have reportedly decided not to renew Clarkson's shows, although a spokesman denied the events were connected. Tom Slater, the editor of Spiked, wrote about this for The Spectator this week, and he joins me now. Tom, welcome to the show. Now, some of the remarks seemed pretty harsh, didn't they, when it came to Meghan Markle? What was going on there?
I think it was a botched joke, effectively. It's the sort of outrageous thing that Jeremy Clarkson is paid to say, essentially. Not, you know, this is his brand, this is what he does. And I think what seemed to happen here is he just didn't really land it. He's even spoken in some of his apologies about how the fact that he didn't really feel like he pulled that one off. I think the problem is that there is a startling level of hypocrisy in the end of this, because I think anyone who would read that column, they might be offended by it, they might be upset by it, they might have thought it had gone too far. But I don't think it's a fair read to say this is willful incitement of violence against women or Meghan Markle or anyone at all. It's a kind of willful hyperbole. And whether you like that or not is up to you. But I don't think that should justify calls for people to be sacked and sentenced.
I got it as a joke straight away because I understood the Game of Thrones reference. It's a reference to Cersei Lannister walking through the town naked while people chant shame at her. That was the reference. And it was deliberately hyperbolic for shock effect. And sure, I'm with people who say that's distasteful, that's offensive. But it's actually had these ramifications. They're denying it, but it does look like Clarkson's Farm and the Grand Tour, both Jeremy Clarkson shows are going to be ditched now. Is that right?
Well, that seems to be the reporting. So Variety last week was suggesting that these shows were for the chop. There's been reporting since suggesting that there might actually be commercial calculations going on here, them underperforming and so on. But I don't think you can, whilst all of that will come out in the wash, I don't think we can deny that the campaign to get him cancelled was very clearly ended towards kicking him off of his particular shows. And even in some cases, people were talking, from Chris Packham, formerly of the BBC, talking about the fact that he should be prosecuted for this. So I don't think whatever happens in the end of this, we can't say this was just a case of these companies taking decisions in a vacuum.
I mean, that's come to be quite normal now, the idea that people are calling for people to be prosecuted. When Jo Brand made her joke, people said she should be prosecuted as well. That seems to be the go-to. Why have we reached this point in society where we can't just say, I find that really hideous and offensive, I really dislike that, you know, I've got my right to criticise it, rather than, let's phone the police, let's have this person sacked. Why is that now the go-to thing?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Why have we ended up completely abandoning all of those proper liberal principles, which is summed up by exactly what you say. I mean, people kind of confuse their own taste and their own kind of offence level with when something should be met with the full force of the law. These two things should not necessarily be equated. But I'm glad you brought up Jo Brand, because I think that's a perfect example of the sort of thing that we're talking about. When she made that joke back in 2019 about, you know, throwing battery acid on Nigel Farage, I don't think anyone could literally hear that and think she is inciting violence against Nigel Farage. It was another case of a joke that didn't land, that upset certain people, that was hyperbolic to express her dislike of a particular individual. How is this any different? And I think going forward, one way that we could start to push back against cancel culture is for anyone who's critical of it to make sure you defend both of those people from different tribes in all instances. Otherwise, this weapon's going to be wielded time and time again.
So consistency, in other words. But is part of the problem that we do have laws on the statute books that criminalise people for being offensive? Isn't that the problem? Shouldn't we just get rid of them?
I think so. I think that's part of the root of the problem. The fact that cancel culture exists also flows from the fact that we have hate speech laws, that we have laws that restrict speech in all different kinds of ways. People will say, well, if people can be locked up for saying something offensive, why shouldn't they at least be sacked for saying something offensive? So you do have to win the argument more broadly. I think the problem with cancel culture, which makes it so slippery, which is what the Clarkson case really is an example of, is the fact that it's the attempts to punish people kind of outside the frame of the law. Can we get them sacked? Can we get them demonised? Can we get them unpersoned?
Yes.
That's a slipperier thing to argue about. It definitely stems from the same censorious impulse.
It feels tribal, because I can't help but notice that the people... I haven't heard many voices say, I really hated what Clarkson had to say, I found that horrible, but I don't want him to be sacked. I haven't heard much of that. You know, it's just been that a sort of way to exploit the system, to get someone silenced.
No, completely. And people do this knowingly and willfully. But I think with all of the double standards in this, I think it just explodes the idea that this is about anything other than trying to bring down someone who some people don't like and who was, in this case, criticising a figure, Meghan Markle, who has, you know, risen to sort of secular sainthood in certain quarters. I mean, it was fascinating to see Claudia Webb MP for Leicester sign that letter, about 60 MPs, writing to The Sun on Sunday, condemning the column, saying he should be punished and so on, who was, again, actually taken through court and given a suspended sentence for harassment for threatening to acid attack someone. So, you know, when you realise the double standards in all of this, all of the kind of high-minded rhetoric about accountability for things that people have said, we shouldn't use our language too saltily and whatever, you start to see that that's not really the game that's being played here. We need to get away from that we need to recognise those double standards, I think, make a principled case, and then we might start to be getting somewhere.
Interesting that it's coming from politicians as well, isn't it? That's very bizarre. Tom Slater, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. And that's all we've got time for this first hour of the show, but there is plenty more to come. That's going to include lots of questions from our beautiful studio audience, and I'll have my panellists, Josh Howie and Diane Spencer, back in the room. All of that is coming up after the break. Do not go anywhere.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, including more questions from the audience, a discussion about the hugely worrying rise in police violence against women, plus social sensations and unfiltered dilemmas. But first, let's get the latest news from Tatiana Sanchez.
Andrew, thank you very much. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. A gunman is still on the loose in California after killing at least 10 people at a Chinese Lunar New Year festival. Thousands of people had been gathering in the city of Monterey Park near Los Angeles when a man opened fire, injuring another 10 people. At least one is in a critical condition in hospital. Officials say it's still unknown whether the attack was racially motivated. The LA County Sheriff says we need to get this person off the street as soon as possible.
Very preliminary description has been described as a male Asian. We're interviewing victims and witnesses. We've gotten different descriptions of one suspect. So when I say it's preliminary, please again be patient with us. We are here to tell you that we are utilizing every resource to apprehend this suspect in what we believe to be one of the county's most heinous cases.
Meanwhile, a cabinet minister has told GB News Nadhim Zahawi has the Prime Minister's support following allegations about his tax affairs. The Conservative Party chairman's admitted he reached a settlement with HMRC, believed to be almost £5 million, following an error over a multi-million-pound shareholding in the polling company YouGov. Labour has called his position untenable, but the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says he believes Mr Zahawi has paid his taxes.
I don't know any more details than what he has already put in the public domain. I don't think it would be right or proper for me to speculate or guess about any further details about his tax affairs. But he has been a successful entrepreneur, building a company which has paid tax, employing people who have paid taxes, and he has himself paid tax, a considerable amount, because he's been successful.
At least 380 migrants have arrived in the UK on 10 small boats overnight, making it the busiest day of channel crossings so far this year. GB News understands a few other small boats have also set off this morning, but they haven't yet made it to the UK. The boats were monitored by French naval vessels, which only intervene if the migrants get into difficulties. Today's arrivals bring the total number of those crossing the channel this year to 530. Family, friends and fans have gathered to attend a memorial service for Lisa Marie Presley, held at her father's estate in Memphis, Tennessee. The US singer and only child of Elvis Presley is being laid to rest at the Graceland mansion she inherited from her rock and roll father. She died on the 12th of January after reportedly suffering a cardiac arrest at her home. She was 54. Among those who paid tribute were the Duchess of York and Lisa Marie's mother, Priscilla, who called her an icon and a superhero. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. We have this wonderful, beautiful studio audience here. It would be a shame to waste them, so let's get some questions from them. We're going to start with Heather. Where is Heather? Hello, Heather. What's your question?
Does the BBC not value older presenters?
Does the BBC not value older presenters? OK, well, they've been criticised this week because Ken Bruce announced he's leaving Radio 2 and he's been presenting for decades. And we've also had former BBC presenter Vanessa Feltz claiming that at the BBC, older presenters aren't valued in the same way. Do they have a point, Josh?
Well, yes.
Ageism, in other words.
Yeah, ageism, yeah, but then they're trying to sort of save themselves, is the idea. This BBC Two, they're trying to appeal to a younger audience, and they're obsessed with it. And when I say younger, I mean people over 50.
People over 50, exactly. But isn't that the point? That, like, most of the, for instance, Radio 4, certainly the listenership, they're an older demographic. In fact, wouldn't you say that the older demographic are sustaining the BBC?
They are sustaining the BBC, but at the same time, you want to get a new viewership in. You can't just kind of stick with your group and then never invite anybody new to your club, because eventually everybody in your club is going to drop dead. It's just the way of life. So they do need to get people in who might have slightly, like, more younger taste. But some of the people who are coming in, they're not exactly like... They give the impression, like Vanessa Feltz gives the impression that it's all like 13-year-olds that are coming and running in. No. You've got people like Michelle Visage, who's wondrous, and she's 54 and fabulous, and she's coming in. And Scott Mills, he's 49. So I don't think it's ageism. I think there's a lot of different factors involved here.
Okay. I'd say one more thing about it. Of course. I mean, I know a bunch of people who work at the BBC and who are, like, they get these reports constantly. They are absolutely obsessed. They're like, they read all these reports. Oh, my God, people under 30 aren't watching telly anymore and all this stuff. The point is, you find these, like Radio 4, when you get to the appropriate age. It's wrong when you meet someone who's in there, who's 18, who listens to Radio 4.
Yeah,
but suddenly, you turn 30 and you're flicking through whatever and you're going, oh, this is an interesting conversation, and this is how it changes. As long as they keep the quality there,
that's true.
It doesn't matter. They'll find their audience because people grow up into it.
I used to listen to Radio 4 when I was 18.
This is exactly my point. This is the problem.
I don't know what point you're making there, Josh. Anyway, we've got an email question now. This has come in from Jane, and Jane has said, should councils be spending money on royal murals? OK, well, I saw this mural. You're referring to the one in Northampton. They spent £2,000. Do we have an image of this mural? This is the picture of King Charles and his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. We'll get that in a second, but it's been described as looking more like a spitting image puppet, which is a bit harsh on the artist.
Oh,
there it is.
yes.
Well, I mean, we're just looking at it right now. Diane, do you think that looks like a spitting image puppet? Do you think that's...
It really does. And do you know what? I mean, there's so much wrong with it. What is exciting about it, though, is Rishi Sunak, I want him to stare at that mural, because this is what you are going to get if you make children take maths till they're 18 and you don't pay attention to the arts.
Yes,
This is what we're going to end up with.
I feel a bit bad for the artist. I mean, because we're all saying this is not a very good... Maybe it was deliberate. Maybe he was trying to be funny.
No, he's rubbish.
He's just a rubbish artist.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's counting his money. He's got his £3,000 and he's like, ha ha!
I thought it was only £1,800.
Oh, well, that's OK, then.
Yeah, but my point is that the guy who paid for it, he had a £3,000 budget. £1,800 was on spray painting that. I think the other £1,200 is going to have to be on removing it.
Well, very harsh response from the panel here, but I think that's probably accurate. We're going to go back to the audience now for a question. This is from Isabel. Where is Isabel?
Yeah,
Hello.
I'm right here. Yeah, hi. Yeah, is it wrong to call a work colleague a mate?
Yeah, mate. I heard about this. I'm sure you all did. Home Office staff were told to avoid words like mate when speaking with colleagues, and this was new guidance from the government saying that it's actually kind of alienating for people with different gender identities and that kind of thing. But it's very laddish, isn't it?
Yeah, but it wasn't guidance by the government. It was like an internal group giving a sort of lesson or what they of PC language or whatever.
Of course, yes.
But what the group was trying to do, because they were really trying to push like pronouns and they, them and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I think that they didn't give a reason for this whole using mate, but I'm guessing it's because they think mate is associated with male. But actually, I use mate continuously, regardless of sex.
What do you think, mate?
Well, I don't know, darling. I mean, the point is, sweetheart, is that as long as you're polite to your work colleagues, I don't think it really matters, does it, treacle ties? Like, I mean, the thing
is mate ever hostile? I suppose it could be...
Mate can be hostile.
Depends on the tone, doesn't it?
Yes.
You want to watch it, mate.
Yeah, you got it. Look at you,
right.
getting all butch.
How
love
butch
it.
was that?
Straight away, I was in a car park. It was fabulous. Yeah, but there's... Like, for example, on YouTube, everybody who starts their video, they usually start their video with, hey, guys, like, no matter who's watching, just, hey, guys, because that's the group. But this is the Home Office.
Yes.
So you do expect them to have a little bit of decorum, I suppose.
But this wasn't about decorum. This was about causing offence, wasn't it? It wasn't really decorum. Who knows? Anyway, we've got another email question now. This is coming from Robert. Robert says, is bringing cake into the office as bad as passive smoking? Now, that sounds like a stupid question. But the chair of the Food Standards Agency has said that bringing cake into the office is the same as passive smoking. This is someone called Professor Susan Jebb. And the thing is, it is... I remember being a school teacher and they always on Monday brought in these massive cakes. And we had very plump staff, right? And but the thing is, that was quite nice. It felt festive the whole year round. You know, what's wrong with that?
No, she's not doing a direct. She's basically comparing it. She's not saying they're exactly the same.
Okay.
But I think she's frustrated because there is a real issue of overeating in this country and eating sugars, food, and there's a lot of this legislation that keeps on getting pushed back.
Right.
So I think she's using it to sort of make
It's a bit alarmist as a comparison.
Yeah,
totally. Because, you know, passive smoking kills. Passive cake eating?
Yes, but there is a slight difference here because she does draw the parallel between smoking and eating, but you have to eat. You do not have to smoke.
You don't have to eat cake, though.
You don't have to eat cake, but you do have to eat. And if you don't eat enough, you can then start to crave that sugar and that fat and things like that, especially if you're on a diet and it's all about self-control.
Is it, but, you know, I remember being at school where there was pressure to smoke from other... Is there peer pressure to eat cake? Is it like, have this Battenberg, go on. I'll give you the first one for free.
I don't know why I'm bringing out all the butch in you, but I'm loving it. Yeah, but also, I did read a study somewhere where if you have overweight or morbidly obese friends, you're more likely yourself to be overweight or morbidly obese.
That's why I don't hang out with fat people.
that's the lesson.
By the way, I've got my son's birthday cake if anyone wants
OK, so we've got another question. This came in from our Twitter feed. Thank you, Rebecca, for tweeting in. Rebecca says, is it a problem if you drink more than 2 bottles of beer a week? That strikes me as monastic more than anything. That's not a problem. But experts apparently are saying that British people should limit themselves to just 2 bottles of beer a week. This has followed guidance from Canada. Of course it come from Canada. I mean, but 2 bottles, that's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, especially, I like to have... Look, I actually have about 3 bottles of beer. I like to have it when I have heroin. And,
just to wash it down.
Yeah, just, you know, get a bit dry. No, this is ridiculous. And this is... Canada now, Canada's going to be like the worst place in the world to live.
If it's not already.
As things are going.
Yeah.
But, yeah, trying to tell British people that you've got to stick down to 2 bottles, good luck with that.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, no one's going to take that seriously, but it just seems like 2 bottles a week is really restrained. Like, the temperance movement would have been happy with that. But, you know, I get it that alcohol can cause problems.
But there's a difference here. And we have a very big difference between Canada because Canada, it is legal to smoke marijuana. And if you're going to take away people's ability to relax at the end of a day, if you're going to take away that bottle of beer, which is kind of just to relax, just going to have a beer, what are you going to replace it with? And Canada has marijuana, but we don't.
Does it come down, Diane, to a mistrust of people in terms of their own willpower? You know, it's just saying, well, trying to restrict it because they don't trust that someone can have 1 beer of an evening. They have to have 2, they have to have 3, they have to have 4.
Well, but I think that's a load of rubbish. I don't know why they think that people can't control themselves. I think it's fair enough to sort of say to people, by the way, if you do have 6 bottles of wine a week, you'll probably end up with a liver problem. Yeah. I think that's absolutely fine to just say. But it's when you actually start imposing bans on people.
Well, also, it's got to be realistic. Two bottles a week, that's not realistic. Anyway, we're going to move on to a question from Twitter again. This is Duncan. Hello, Duncan. Duncan says, should we be sanitising Shakespeare for a modern audience? I read this article this week. This was the artistic director of the Globe Theatre, Michelle Terry. She says, this is a weird angle on it, she says that she's worried that by changing Shakespeare in the way that they do, they may be putting performers in harm's way, because the theatres have been putting on lots of woke versions of plays like Romeo and Juliet. The Romeo and Juliet production they did recently had a content warning and had suicide helplines projected up on the screen at the back of the... This is why I don't go to the theatre anymore, because it feels like a lecture. But she says that the reaction on social media can be really ugly and the performers are subject to abuse. But shouldn't they just put on Shakespeare as Shakespeare?
Well, it sounds like it's the audience that needs protection.
Right, yeah, from these plays.
From this stuff. And I read this article and it really wound me up because it's this classic thing of equating a few, like, people complaining online, not abusively complaining, but to, like, this is going to happen, real-world violence. And
yes, exactly.
Whereas you actually see real hatred coming from aimed towards gender-critical people and then going into violence, but the other way around, they go, oh, like, our actors are going to be attacked because people disagree with this position. It's just not, it's not going to happen.
No, exactly. It's tweets like, oh, that non-binary Joan of Arc show was rubbish.
Yeah.
That's violence against our actors.
God,
basically,
they should try having a YouTube channel.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Far worse. Just read our tweets. It's fabulous. No, I think this is a load of rubbish because, like, I think it's presumptuous because if they're putting up a suicide hotline at the end of Romeo and Juliet, they are assuming that their acting is so good that you are going to think about suicide. And I'm like, no. Like, I want to see the acting first, because I've seen some pretty bad Shakespeare.
Well, it's also quite patronising. The idea of putting a content warning on Shakespeare tragedy and saying there might be some death. There might be some violence in this. I mean, people, we know...
There might be some oldie language.
Yeah. There might be tights that are ill-fitting. We know. We don't need to. Anyway, we've got another question now. This one is from Thomas in the audience. Hello, Thomas. Hi.
Are you surprised Jacinda Ardern is stepping down?
Yeah, this was a surprising announcement from New Zealand this week. Jacinda Ardern announced she was standing down as Prime Minister. Been 5.5 years. She says she doesn't have enough in the tank, so she is burnt out, right? Is that right, Josh? Is that fair?
She's a burnt-out tank. She's going to go to Ukraine. No, it's... anyone who follows New Zealand politics know that, actually, she's probably going to be voted out.
Right, yeah.
But, yeah, it's obvious that it's taken its toll. Now, I hesitate to say this because then I'll be accused of being a misogynist, but I'd say it if you look, you know, with Obama, you look at his hair at the end of his office, he went from sort of brown to, like, white hair at the end. You look at photos of her 5.5 years ago, it has taken a lot out of her.
Yeah, of course.
There's no doubt. And she's got a young child. So how she has been doing it is amazing.
No one is denying that she's a human being. It's a stressful job. Of course it is. But, you know, the trouble with Jacinda Ardern, of course, is she's pursued so many sort of policies which have alienated lots of voters. Yeah. Very woke policies. You know, the lockdown was so severe that people are now reacting against it. So is that what this is really about? You know, she's just...
I think part of it is about she's jumping before she's pushed.
Yeah.
But also, in order to have a successful leadership that doesn't drain you absolutely dry, you need to have a very good team behind you, and you need to be willing to trust that team to spread the message out, and everybody needs to be on board. If you're like that, then you can keep going sort of for a very long time. Like, we noticed that Putin doesn't get burnt out, sadly, because everybody is on board with the message.
Yes, there's a reason for that.
But, yeah, I think it's a case of jumping before she's pushed.
Well, that seems to be the consensus here. Well, anyway, we've got to go to a break now, but after the break on Free Speech Nation, the director of For Women Scotland will be here to tell us what she thinks about that gender recognition reform bill. See you in a couple of minutes. I mean, we're doing a lot about that, but...
On Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guest is one of the most experienced politicians in the country, Lord Peter Lilly, who served under Margaret Thatcher and John Major. What does he make of Rishi Sunak and the current Conservative Party? Plus his views on Brexit, the economy and illegal immigration. And in my Big Opinion monologue, when did standing up for women's hard-won, sex-based rights make you a bad person? Plus tomorrow's papers and my all-star panel. We're live from 9.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Earlier on in the programme, we were discussing Rishi Sunak's move to block the SNP's gender reform bill. On Saturday, hundreds gathered in Glasgow to protest against the blocking of the bill. But we've also seen many people protesting against the bill. So here to give us a Scottish perspective is Susan Smith, co-director of For Women Scotland, a women's group who are working to protect and strengthen women and children's rights. Susan, thanks for joining me. I want to ask you first about the reform bill and what are your principal oppositions to this bill?
Principally, it's because it opens up this process that was limited to a very small number of people to just about anybody, and there's no safeguards around it whatsoever. And I think, then you start to get into these more intense questions about whether or not actually in law we should be allowing people to change sex, which is a protected characteristics, because of the impact it has on other people. And what we brought a JR, judicial review, last year, and the ruling said that when a person gets GRC, they change their sex under the Equality Act for all purposes. So that's a massive thing. And if you're allowing just anybody to walk up and change their sex, you are diluting the protections that are available for women. And not just protections, things like data collection, policy planning, looking at things like gender pay gaps and so on. All of that stuff just becomes meaningless the more people can take advantage of this.
I've been reading a lot about the debates that happened in the Scottish Parliament, the SNP saying that they had rigorous debate, but then at the same time, Nicola Sturgeon saying that the views of feminists around this issue have no merit. And that doesn't sound like a serious debate, does it, if you just completely dismiss the alternative view? What has your experience been of trying to present your view to the SNP?
Oh, do you know, it's been awful. So we have spoken to two ministers who were supposed to be leading on this. The first one was Shirley-Ann Somerville. And my colleagues took pages, I mean, pages and pages, it was a wad of questions, into her and said, look, these are the things you need to address. These are some of the issues. Now, some of them were less important than others, but there were crucial things about what do you understand a GRC to do, which they continued not to answer. And the current minister, Shona Robertson, refused to answer that. And they kept on saying it doesn't change people's access to any programmes or any services or anything like that. It doesn't change anything. And then they went to court and argued the opposite. And they argued actually the same case that the HRC brought to them a year ago when they said, you are expanding this. We think it's a problem because we think it changes people's rights. And the Scottish government said, no, it doesn't. And then they went to court and made that argument. So they've been spinning two different stories the whole way through this. And so many times when we encountered the civil servants and the ministers, they really didn't seem to have a clue what this was about or what they were doing or how things can be interconnected and how you can have unintended consequences and how you have to look around for things. And they did not even look at the cross-border implications, which was one of the things that the UK government were not happy about, rightly. They had the most superficial and amateur approach to this bill, and I think it's been a shocking reflection on how Scotland's governed.
I mean, isn't one of the problems, you say there that a lot of people just don't understand the issues, and I couldn't help but notice that some of the debates in the London Parliament about all of this have descended into sloganeering and shouting, and that whenever we've heard women who are concerned about their single-sex spaces and the threat that it poses to women's rights to have gender self-ID, you've had politicians, male politicians, I should say, shouting at them, saying this is a transphobic dog whistle, saying this is all about hate. And I'm sure you've had those kind of accusations yourself. What do you make of that?
It's, you know, after a while you start to get used to it, but I'm not sure you should become desensitized to it, but you do. And yeah, there are some politicians in Holyrood who have made some really actually outrageous and disgusting comments about women who are opposed to this bill. And, you know, they seem to think that at best we're deluded and at worst we're actively evil. And they whip up a lot of hostility. And, you know, we saw politicians turning out to that demo in Glasgow this week, and there were signs, which I'm sure you've seen in the press, saying things like decapitate TERFs. And this shouldn't be normalised. Nobody should be normalising this sort of behaviour, and nobody should be excusing it, but they are. And a lot of the people who are very involved in the activism have got track records of making abusive comments, threatening comments, and it's simply not good enough. And it's not good enough for the organisations who are setting up and supporting these rallies not to investigate and publicly condemn all of this.
That's something I do want to ask you about, is the violent rhetoric that's coming from certain activists. You mentioned the sign at the protest saying decapitate TERFs. I think we might have an image of that sign if we could look at that. But there were two SNP politicians standing in front of the sign that an activist was holding saying decapitate TERFs. Of course, it is perfectly possible that that sign was put up. They didn't see it. All the rest of it. There's the sign there that we can see now on the screen. But that kind of violent rhetoric is seen again and again from activists. I know that one of the activists sitting in the gallery during the debates was pictured with an axe on Twitter threatening gender-critical feminists. What is going on here, and why are we seeing this kind of rhetoric?
And a knife. And actually, that person was making the speeches at that rally. It was one of the people who were organising the entire rally. And the politicians were chumming around, and they're all very friendly and praising each other. And every time they have one of these rallies, there's a placard like that. There were actually 4 politicians standing there. The picture that's there is just of the 2, but they were all SNP. And they have all said they didn't see it now. you know, that maybe they didn't. But I think if you go to one of these events, you have to be quite careful if you're a politician, because there are going to be signs like that, and these politicians know that. They're supposed to be aware, and that filming was done by the National, which is a hugely pro SNP publication. So obviously they didn't think it was a problem. There were organisers putting up pictures of some of those placards before they turned up, going, "Oh, look at these lovely placards we've made," and that was one of them. It was front and centre on some of the pictures.
I mean, I just find it very surprising that people can say they're turning a blind eye to this kind of thing, because I keep hearing, oh, there's violent rhetoric on both sides. But and I would condemn that kind of rhetoric on all sides. But genuinely, when you objectively look at it, I've never seen gender-critical feminists threaten to kill anyone or that kind of thing. And yet I see it all the time, images of guns and things saying kill TERFs and this kind of thing. There is a problem on that side that does need to be addressed by the people who are advocating for those causes, doesn't there?
They do. And, you know, I think we wrote years ago to the Equality Network, because we've been threatened by this singer, headline singer at Trans Pride, and they then withdrew. But some of the people around that went absolutely nuts about it, and then started just repeating this threat and saying, you know, basically saying, well, they deserve it, kind of thing. And we actually wrote to Equality Network and said, we know you provide funding for this event. Can you please have a word with these people? And they just said, oh, no, we condemn violence, but no, we can't tell people what to say. One of the people actually organising the event was somebody employed by them, so I'm not sure why they couldn't intervene. And they offered to sit down with us and explain to us why self-ID wouldn't harm our rights. And we said, well, you know, if you've got people threatening us with violence, I'm sorry, we think that does interfere with our rights. But they're a government-funded organisation, and they were not prepared at that point to step in and condemn these threats. So, yeah, we're very pleased that the UK government stepped in. Actually, I don't think they had an option, because the Scottish government kept being told what they were doing was going to impinge on the Equality Act. They were told over and over, and they didn't listen. I mean, they say the weight of evidence was in their favour. Well, it was, because they had a very biased process. They invited a load of people who were activists on that side. Some people who weren't particularly senior, some people who weren't particularly knowledgeable in this area. You know, they invited a theatre lecturer to give evidence on statistics because he was one of them, yes, and didn't invite Alice Sullivan until pressed. So the whole process has been shameful. It's been a shocking reflection.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it, but we are out of time. Thank you, Susan Smith.
Thank you.
So, after the break on Free Speech Nation, the writer Julie Bindel will be here to talk about the hugely concerning rise in violence and misogyny among our police forces. See you in a minute.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate. with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Met police officer David Carrick has pleaded guilty to 49 sexual offences, including 24 counts of rape spanning over a decade. Carrick passed vetting, despite the fact he'd been previously investigated for harassing a former partner months before. But it seems Carrick may not be an isolated example, with Police Scotland revealing that 25 officers have been suspended over sexual misconduct allegations. Yesterday, Home Secretary Suella Braverman said public trust in the police is at breaking point. There can be no more excuses. Someone who has publicly condemned the police and is an outspoken advocate for protecting women's safety is writer and activist Julie Bindel. She joins me now. Good evening, Julie. Thanks for joining me. This is a very, very serious case. This man, David Carrick, passed vetting. So is this a problem that is just within the system that the police are running at the moment?
I mean, it's not just about the vetting, it's about the culture within the police service. And not just the Met, but across the entire service. It's about canteen culture. The canteen culture that we thought, that we hoped had dissipated, had changed back in the 1990s after, you know, much chagrin from feminists and from others that saw the system and how it worked and how it operated. Now, I remember back in the 1980s when I first started working alongside the police as a civilian to persuade them and to equip them to better understand violence against women. When they went out, for example, to a domestic violence call out, where they would simply look in the cupboard, see if there was enough food, check that the children were okay, believe the word of the perpetrator and tell the mother that she shouldn't use such foul language and she shouldn't be drinking. I mean, awful, awful practice. And what we had to do then was explain that sometimes women are angry when they go to these call-outs, and also that the perpetrators will try to charm them, get them on board, one man to another type of thing. And we had a double whammy at the time because, of course, this was before the Crown Prosecution Service was founded. And so the police did their own charging. So we also had to persuade the police why they should actually charge men, even though they thought that they weren't monsters and looked like perfectly reasonable blokes, for rape and sexual assault when there was evidence. And now you fast forward to today, and we seem to be surprised that these men take advantage of a culture that we have, which is pretty much impunity. There is an amnesty on rapists at the moment. Let's not even just look within the police service. Let's look across the board. We have a 1% conviction rate for rape. From reporting to rape, in other words, a fraction of those that are reported end up with a guilty conviction, unless 99% of women that report rape are making it up. Then I think we have a huge problem. And this, of course, filters down into the police service, where they know fine well, not only can they get away with harming women if that happens to be their thing, their leisure activity, something they enjoy doing, but they also have the additional tools to tell women that if they report them, then they will be in trouble. And we know from the Centre for Women's Justice, the feminist legal charity, that they have had hundreds of women come forward to report police-perpetrated violence against them. And some of these women are serving police officers, or were. Many of the whistleblowers were ousted, were pushed out, some of them even criminalised. And others are civilians who would have been in a very vulnerable position. Maybe they'd reported domestic abuse or rape and got visited by these men that understand that their warrant card is additional protection for them, gives them additional gall to carry out these acts. So the entire root and branch culture of the police service needs to be changed.
And it's a real problem, isn't it, Julie? Because women will rely on the police when they are attacked, when they're in situations with domestic violence. And if they can't trust that they can go to the police, then this is surely a disaster for women's rights.
It is. And in fact, I've engaged as far as I possibly can with the whole defund the police arguments about, and, I'm sympathetic on one level that what we have is a police service rotten to its core, in my view. We need to start all over again thinking about how to rebuild it. But defunding the police is not going to end up with a kind of happy anarchist society where crimes are committed and then there's a trust circle with the victim in the middle and all of the community surrounding this victim talking to the perpetrator about how it's really not very nice to torture, rape, murder women and to beat their female partners. It doesn't work when it comes to violence against women. So we need a police service, because if we didn't have a working, functional police service that's fit for purpose, there would be even more violence against women. And quite frankly, we're at an absolutely obscene level of it right now because of the lack of sanctions. So what I would say we need to do is not appeal to the better judgment of these officers, which I have to say I used to back in the early days. I'd say to them, listen, officer, it's not very nice, is it? Can you imagine if your mother was battered, for example, or that female friend of yours and nobody cared about her? Surely you need to arrest the perpetrator and prevent this from happening to her again. I would tap into their better judgment. Often there was none, not because they were sociopaths, but because they didn't particularly engage with these arguments. So what we did when we changed our tack as feminists working to improve police practice was that we ensured, or we tried to, that if these police officers reneged on their duty, neglected the victims of male violence and did nothing to support them, and we've all seen homicides of women where that has played out, where the police could have protected them and didn't. What we did was we said there has to be sanctions. There has to be serious sanctions against officers that renege on their duty or that commit acts of violence against women themselves. And these sanctions, they're not being docked a week's pay. It's not just being told off, being carpeted by their superintendent. It's being sacked. And only then will police officers recognise that they can't do this and get away with it.
So this kind of process that you're describing of sort of changing the police force from within to make it safer for women, that's going to take some time, isn't it? But at the moment, I note the other day that the head of Wimbledon High School, Fionnuala Kennedy, has advised her girls at the school not to go to a lone police officer if in trouble. So that's going to create all sorts of problems, isn't it, at the moment? How do we deal with this if this process is going to take a long time?
I mean, it's an emergency situation. It has been for some time. We hear talk about, a bad apple. The barrel is rotten. It has been for so long. It's been allowed to fester. So what we need to do is impose immediate sanctions. We need to look at external reviews, external investigations into poor police practice, into those allegations of abuse. We do not want the police to investigate the police. It does not work, because they will always back their colleagues. We know this from police culture. So external reviews, rigorous reviews, but we also need to do something that should have been done a long time ago, which is make it a safe environment for whistleblowers. When somebody, whether it's a direct victim, a female police officer who's been sexually harassed by someone like Wayne Couzens, someone like David Carrick, and we know that these behaviours escalate, and it's exactly what happened with these officers. They got away with the low-level crimes, they escalated to really serious crimes, in Couzens' case, of course, murder. What we need to do is, when those whistleblowers want to report problematic behaviour, and that can mean misogynistic, jibing, it can mean literally verbal misogyny, or through to direct allegations of wrongdoing and sexual assault, those whistleblowers need to be protected, because I'm sick and tired of hearing of women and some men who've blown the whistle being forced out of the police service. And it serves as a warning to everyone else that wants to make an allegation about another officer. We need transparency, and we need it urgently.
Julie Bindel, thank you very much for joining me. I just want to ask my panel about that because, you know, it's such a serious issue, isn't it, Diane? The culture within the police. And, you know, I'm very nervous about trying to sort of police people's banter at work. But we're talking about the police force here. So when the police force are being casually misogynistic, that does matter, doesn't it?
It really does matter, because it gives you a window as to how your colleagues are thinking. And being a woman at this time is very interesting, because when the David Carrick story came out, I literally heard the beginning of the news, and the beginning of the news said, a serving police officer has been found guilty, and before they'd even said it, I thought, he's raped someone. And I was right. And how can I... That shouldn't be that I can do that immediately, because, like I said to my husband, I said, this is appalling. If I have a burglary in my house... and I call the police, oh, goody, a rapist has turned up.
It's so difficult.
Are you insane?
It's one of the points I made to Julie, that, you know, but we do need a police force. And so when people say to me, defund the police, get rid of the police, it's not fit for purpose, I think the alternative is worse, in a way. So how do we handle this?
Well, as she says, it needs to be a sort of a cultural change.
Right.
And one of the ways to do that is by, certainly, one of the things she said was firing, or... there has to be just a lot more rules.
I think protection of whistleblowers, that point she made was a really good point.
I think she made loads of great points. But there is a real issue. I think the government seems to be finally recognising that there's an issue. But it's amazing that, I mean, how many people have to come forward? How many serving officers have to commit rape and kill people before? Like, it's ridiculous that it's taken this far for them to go, oh, now we're going to look at these other people.
Yeah. Is there a line for people who have been harassed by the police that you can call? Is there a specific line or a specific, like, part of the internet that you can write to?
And if there is, do people know about it?
No, well, I don't.
OK, well, we'll have to leave it there. But after the break on Free Speech Nation, it'll be time for Social Sensations, which will include Chancellor Jeremy Hunt using coffee cups to explain inflation, and a BBC football show interrupted by the soundtrack to a porno movie. And we thought we had technical issues here. See you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So it's time for Social Sensations. That's the part of the show where we look at the world of social media and the stories that have captured the imagination of the public. So first up, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt found an unusual way to tell the public about the perils of inflation.
Hi, can I get a flat white, please? Of course. While my coffee is being made, let me tell you what we're doing to halve inflation. I'm afraid coffee is getting more expensive. A year ago, it would have been around £2.50, but now it's gone up to nearly £3 a cup. And the price of the weekly shop, if you look at food prices, has gone up by about 16%. And for the poorest families, the things they typically buy have gone up by even more.
Well, A for effort.
No, I mean, is anybody else worried that the Chancellor can't actually read numbers? Like, he says it's £2.50-ish. It's like, no, mate, that's £2.56. And then he said it's nearly £3. It's like, no, mate, no, that's £2.86. You're not...
Diana, please don't say mate.
It's really offensive. Deeply offensive. Do you have any feelings about Jeremy Hunt?
Well, first of all, if you watch the full clip, he doesn't actually pay for the coffee. So it's
outrageous.
Costs him nothing.
And he gets two!
He gets two.
Yeah, well, he gets two coffees because he gets handed his finished coffee and then he goes and picks up another coffee. It's like, you blooming Tory, double dipping.
Also, it's not good for the environment. He's just wasting a lot of cups there.
It's very critical response.
And he missed a certain cup called Brexit.
Oh, for goodness sake, John. We've got a few minutes left on the show. We're not getting into that now, for goodness sake. Anyway, next up, Kim Kardashian. Seems to go viral every week, but even by her usual standards, her makeover as a, quote, British chav caught the imagination. Let's have a look.
If you don't know me, I'm M to the B. Coming in hard, you better watch it. So do you think you're the only girl doing grime? M to the B.
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't really know who she is. I mean, why is she famous? Is that what she does? Is that what she's famous for?
No, you've never heard of the Kardashians?
I've heard of them, but I don't know what they do.
No, but I think the idea is that she's somewhat slumming it. I think people are very happy that she's sort of doing this, what's called a chav challenge, where you're sort of putting up your makeup.
A chav challenge?
Yeah, you're dressing up, you're putting your makeup on really badly. Look, I've done it.
You just dress as a chav?
I'm proud, I'm happy to say I failed it. Okay. This is it.
Yeah, but, I mean, the irony is that I don't think she truly understands that chav actually was an acronym for council housed and violent, for a start. It's very classist.
Is that what it was?
Yes.
Yes, actually, I remember reading about that.
Yeah, no.
And it was in Owen Jones's book. He said that was the... Because he had a book called Chavs. Yeah. And he mentioned that I think, unless I heard it from somewhere else, but anyway.
Your favourite writer?
I think it's a quite good book, actually.
But the other issue is that she is essentially taking the mickey out the way that people do their makeup. But they do their makeup in that way because they're trying to emulate her look. They're just not very good at emulating it. She's essentially taking the mick out of people who can't do her makeup look very well.
Oh, well, that's not very nice, is it?
I don't think it is.
Well, we've got time for one more social sensation. I think this is Gary Lineker, Match of the Day presenter Gary Lineker. He got a surprise while presenting. Let's have a look.
Find out shortly. We've an FA Cup winners only policy in the studio tonight.
And I don't know who's making that noise, but so Alan Shearer.
What is going on there?
Is that what sex sounds like to other people? That's not what it sounds like to me.
So is
that sounded awful.
pornographic kind of...
Not in my house, it's not. It sounded like somebody making balloon animals. That sounded terrible.
I wonder where that's come from.
A prankster stuck a phone in the studio before and then called it. He was very pleased with himself. He thinks he's the wittiest person in the world. It's like,
Josh is angry he didn't think of it.
Oh, I'm not angry at all. I just think it's lame.
It's just silly, isn't it? Anyway, look, we've just got... Josh!
It's my phone!
Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we do have time quickly for your unfiltered dilemmas, and you send these in every week, and we're very grateful to them. Here's one from Joe, and Joe says, my grandma recently passed away, but apparently you can pay £28,000 to freeze the body in case she can be brought back to life in the future. Does that sound like a good idea? Isn't that what they did with Walt Disney, I think?
Look,
is that right?
We got pranked last week. Someone wrote one of these in and they were talking about Everton. This person's grandma's alive!
You think this is a lie?
Yeah.
You think this is... Well, I suspect most of these are made up, if I'm honest. But what do you... I mean, it's interesting, though, isn't it, that freezing the body for a time when you could cure death, for instance.
Yes.
Would that be interesting?
Well, he's saying, does it sound like a good deal? I mean, 28 grand, so you have to think about the cryo tube, you have to think about the liquid. You have to also think that electricity prices, they fluctuate. And this cryo tube is going to need a certain amount of power to remain frozen and to keep your grandma in a condition before she can be reanimated.
Oh, I see.
So 28,000, as long as it doesn't include any fluctuations in terms of the electricity price, probably a good deal, depending on how long you can get it for.
OK, well, thanks, Diane. We're going to look into it. Very interesting. I'll be looking into that next week. Anyway, thank you for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when Sunak and Sturgeon locked their constitutional horns. Cake in the office was problematised, and the Prime Minister got in trouble with the law again, this time for a seatbelt. Thank you so much to my panel, Diane Spencer and Josh Howie, and to all of my guests this evening. And by the way, if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our wonderful audience, you can easily do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. Come along, share the wine and the fun. There's the address on the screen right now, and you can apply there. It's all free, so come along. Stay tuned, of course, for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That is next. Don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the show where comedians take you through the next day's papers. Josh Howie, I believe, is going to be on that tonight. That's every night at 11 o'clock. Do not miss it. I'm sometimes hosting, but not tonight. Who is it tonight? It's someone else. Someone better,
Leo.
probably. It's Leo Curse. Thank you for watching Free Speech Nation. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Hello there. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry. We do have a split picture as we move into the new working week. There's high pressure stretching itself into southeastern areas to provide more of a settled start here. But further in the northwest, we've got frontal systems that want to push their way in. This will be associated with more extensive clouds, but also some patchy outbreaks of rain and drizzle across southwest Scotland, the Isle of Man and other coastal districts of the Irish Sea. When we do hold on to the clearer skies in the southeast, that will allow the return of some freezing fog patches overnight. These could be quite dense in places as we start off first thing, so do just take care when you're travelling. Pretty chilly to start off the week as well, with a frost developing across the southeast, but we'll be staying milder in the northwest under the cloud, but the cloud is going to stay pretty much in place and those outbreaks of rain continuing. Once the freezing fog patches do clear, we will see some sunnier spells for Yorkshire into the Midlands and down towards Hampshire, but more cloud pushing into Kent and eastern areas of Anglia. A contrast in the temperatures again during Monday, fairly cold in the southeast, but once again mild in the northwest, highs around 10 degrees Celsius. Again, into the overnight period, a sharp frost will develop where we hold on to the clearer skies, but with the cloud now pushing into the southeast, we'll just have a reduced risk of frost here in towns and cities, probably more around low single figures, but in the northwest it's going to remain pretty mild once again, maybe not even dropping as low as 9 Celsius. The breeze picking up a bit more in the north as well as we see further outbreaks of rain push into the Hebrides and the Northern Isles at times. A reduced number of sunny intervals on Tuesday. Now that cloud has pushed its way into the southeast, it will be parts of Lincolnshire into the Birmingham area and eventually southwest England that see them. A bit of a reversal of fortunes into the week ahead. Eventually that mild air will push its way down towards the south. See you later.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's